Hello everyone. In this class, we are going to discuss one of the chapters in class 8 biology, and that is reproduction in animals. Okay. The part that we are going to discuss today in this chapter is mode of reproduction. So let us begin. So before starting the mode of reproduction, let us understand what we mean by reproduction. Reproduction is a process in which organisms produce young ones or the progenies, okay, which are similar to them, okay. And the process of reproduction happens in two ways. Either it is asexual mode of reproduction, which primarily occurs in primitive group of organism, and then sexual mode of reproduction, which occurs in advanced group of organisms. But the mode in which the young ones are produced from the parent, okay, the mode means the way they are produced, okay, basis that the organisms can be classified as two types. One group of organism is called as oviparous organisms. The other one is called as viviparous organisms. Okay. So, oviparous organisms or animals are the animals which produce eggs or which lay eggs in the outside environment. Okay. And after that, after complete development of the eggs in the external environment, the young ones are hatched. Okay. So, here what happens in oviparous organisms, the a part of the embryonic development takes place inside the mother, very little, okay. And most of the embryonic development happens outside, okay. So, only a part of the embryonic development occurs inside the mother, okay. But maximum part of the embryonic development happens outside. As embryonic development happens outside, so therefore, the egg which is there produced out to be released outside, the egg contains a large amount of nutrients, because if it is there outside, so something should provide them the nutrition or support for the development. So that is why the eggs which are produced by oviparous organisms contains a large amount of yolk, okay, and this yolk is the nutritive substance which is required for the development of the embryo, okay. Whereas the organisms which are called as viviparous organisms, okay, they produced young ones, live birth, okay. So, they produced young ones directly from their body. In this case, the eggs are not released to an external environment, and after a period of time it is not hatched. The development completely takes place inside the uterus of the mother, okay. And as the complete embryonic development takes place inside the mother, the eggs which are produced in such cases has a very little amount of yolk or no yolk, because of the fact that it is connected to the internal environment of the mother, where the nutrition is directly absorbed from the mother itself. So, therefore, no egg should not have a large amount of yolk. In the earlier case, in the oviparous case, the egg should contain a large amount of yolk as the egg is laid outside. So, this is the major differences between the oviparous organisms and that of the viviparous organisms. If we look at some examples, for example, most of the birds, okay, like the example in case of the birds here that we can see in the picture, okay. So, here the eggs are laid outside. So, the eggs which are laid outside is a fertilized egg, okay. That means the fertilization has already taken place. Where the fertilization has taken place? Inside the mother, okay. And after the fertilization has taken place, some of the little bit of embryonic development would have taken place inside, and then the egg would have been laid outside. And then after a period of time, the egg is going to be hatched. In case of viviparous organism like us, okay, or most mammals, okay, they undergo viviparous development. In such cases, what happens? The young ones are directly produced from the body of the human being, from the body of the organism. Let us look at some more characteristic features of oviparous organisms to that of the viviparous organisms. If we look at oviparous organisms, the fertilization here can take place both outside the body of the mother or it can take place inside the body of the mother. Okay. So, oviparous can undergo two different features. Okay. Fertilization can be internal or fertilization can be external. For example, if the oviparous, in case the fertilization takes place in an outside environment, the type of oviparity is called as ovuliparity. Okay. In this case, the fertilization is taking place out in the external medium. For example, feces. The male gamete as well as the female gamete is dispersed into the external environment, which is the water in this case, and by chance the union of male gamete and the female gamete will take place and that will produce the zygote and then embryo. Okay. So, such kind of development is called as ovuliparity. Whereas, in a true oviparity, the fertilization is going to take place internally. For example, in case of chicken or birds. Okay. So, the fertilization is internal, and after the fertilization is taken place, the egg is going to produce, okay, or is going to be covered with a calcareous cell. Okay. Calcareous means hard cell. As you can see, for example, the eggs that you get from the market, okay, or that we consume, consist of a hard covering outside, which is called as calcareous cell. Okay. So, they are primarily made up of calcium carbonate. Okay. The major reason why it is covered with a calcareous cell, that is going to provide protection. Okay. And also desiccation of the embryo. Desiccation means if the embryo would be kept for a long time in the outside environment, what is going to happen? The water which is present inside is going to evaporate. As there will not be any water left for the embryo to develop, so embryonic development is not going to take place, because water is a predominant factor for any metabolic activities, right. So, therefore, they are protected by a calcareous cell and which has pores, and that pores helps in the diffusion of the gases, because embryo needs to respire. Okay. And for respiration, we know that oxygen is critical, right, because in the process of respiration energy is created, which is ATP, and for the development of embryo ATP is required, and for that diffusion of gases should take place. Okay. So, calcareous cell is an adaptation to the terrestrial environment, because when ovuliparity takes place, okay, this mostly takes place in external fertilization in a water medium, and if it is taking place in a water medium, the egg is not going to be surrounded by a calcareous cell. Okay, because there are less chances of desiccation here, because it is already present in the water environment. So, therefore, no calcareous cell or covering is seen in case of ovuliparity. But in true oviparity, a calcareous covering is one of the most important feature of the organisms. Okay. And the calcareous covering here is an adaptation to the terrestrial environment, because here the organisms are staying in the aquatic environment. So, therefore, there is lesser chances of desiccation. I hope this would have been clearer to you. Okay. Let us move on. So, now let us look at the characteristic features of viviparous animals. Okay. So, viviparous animals where the fertilization has to be taken place internally, because the growth and development is taking place internally. So, therefore, the fertilization should also happen internally. There is one exception in that case, in case of in vitro fertilization. So, in vitro fertilization is artificial method in which is practiced for parents who has incapability of reproducing due to errors in the fertilization process, okay, because there are certain structural defects that is why the fertilization cannot happen. So therefore, in such cases external fertilization takes place, which is called as in vitro fertilization, and after the embryo is produced, the embryo is implanted in the uterus. So that is an exception because it is an artificial fertilization, but naturally viviparous organisms should always undergo internal fertilization. So the fertilization takes place internally and the embryo is implanted in the uterus. After the embryo is implanted in the uterus, so they develop a structure which is called as the placenta. Okay. And the placenta helps in deriving the young ones derive nutrition directly from the placenta, because that is the connection that happens between the mother's body to that of the fetus, okay, and that is how the nutrition is derived from the mother. Most of the nutrition is directly derived from the mother itself, okay. As the embryo development takes place inside, hence the egg that is produced, okay, in such cases, the fertilized egg that we are talking about, that has very less amount of yolk. So this is one of the critical distinctions between oviparity and viviparity. In oviparity, the amount of yolk has to be higher because the nourishment is given from the egg itself, and here the nourishment is provided by the body of the female, okay, or the mother, and hence therefore here in such cases the yolk amount has to be lower, okay. And of course there is no question of calcareous cell in such cases because the development is happening internally. So there is lesser damage, lesser desiccation, chances of desiccation. So then of course there is no need to develop an external wall around the egg itself, which is called as calcareous cell, and no hatching is seen in such cases. In case of oviparous organisms, okay, so oviparous organisms, once the egg is laid outside, after a period of incubation time, the egg is hatched. In such cases, hatching is also not seen. So these are the major differences between the reproduction that takes place in oviparous organisms and that viviparous organisms. I hope this would have given you a clearer idea and understanding about the mode of reproduction in organisms. In the next class, we will bring similar lectures for you. Thank you very much.